All right. Welcome, everyone. As you've probably heard, we're switching to Mercurial for our source code management system. We're only doing this for the Moab repositories. So MCM, any of your personal repositories that you may use on the professional services side, Torque, all those will remain in Subversion. And it's up to other people to decide if you want to move or not. So during this presentation, I'm going to be doing some PDF slides. And then I'll also be doing some from the command line to show you kind of some of the new commands, how they work. They're very similar to Subversion. That's one of the reasons we picked Mercurial. So we're going to be talking about why we're switching to Mercurial. We're going to give a small introduction to distributed source control, HG installation and basics, the use cases, the demo I'll do from the command line, new capabilities with Mercurial, also called HG, and then of course we'll have questions. You can ask questions in the middle too. I don't care. So. Yes, Doug.
Oh, never mind. I was going to ask why we're switching to Mercurial.
Here we go. My plan is for people to raise their hands, and I'll hit the slide and I'll answer the question instantly. Okay, so here's some of the reasons why we're switching to Mercurial. There's probably others, but these are some of the high-level ones that I could think of, and that Sean and others could think of. So, by the way, Sean helped a lot with the discovery process, so thanks, Sean. And so easier branch creation. We've noticed that there's a lot of Moab development going on that's kind of risky or scary at times. And so we wanted to make it easier for people to create branches without having to come speak with me or Doug or somebody else.
Dave Jackson?
Or go talk to Dave about that as well, yeah. So now you can create these things we call private branches. And we'll show you exactly what that means and how to do that. There's better merge capabilities. You may have seen me when I do when I had to do a merge, I had this little book to keep track of all the revisions and where they've all crisscrossed and go. So there's not conflicts in the future. Mercurial makes it so you don't need that anymore, which is really nice. It allows private revision control without breaking the build. So if, say, for example, Brady's working from home and he's working on some risky MCM features, he's creating an Easter egg for MCM, and he is working on it. There's often, a lot of times when you guys are developing, I'm this way, I want to check in a little bit of what I've worked on so I don't have this huge patch at the end that I have to check in. And this will allow you to do that. He'll be able to check in as many times as he wants on his local copy of the repository, and then he can push those changes as a whole, or he can collapse them and send them all in one patch, things like that. So it's kind of nice to keep track of your own local revision history as well. It's a lot faster than SVN. It's a smaller disk footprint. And the SVN directories aren't spread out in every single directory. There's only one .hg directory at the root of your clone or your checkout directory. The entire repository is included with every checkout. So if you need to do a blame or a log or something, in Subversion it used to have to go out to Arc to do that. And so if someone was running a blame while someone else was running a blame, it would take forever. Now you can run a blame and it only affects your local system. Is my head in the way?
I'll just move.
Okay, sorry. Let me know where I should stand or move. So these are some of the reasons.
So is that a positive reason that everything gets checked out?
It is a positive reason. There's one downside to it, and that is security. The other thing you guys may be concerned about is, it'll be really slow to check it out. Well, I timed it, and it's just 3 seconds slower than checking it with Subversion. And the disk space is actually smaller. Mercurial's working directory with all the repository history is smaller than Subversion's checkout, which doesn't contain any of the revision history. I don't know how they do it, but it is. Yes?
Nothing you said. There's a Subversion checkout and a Mercurial checkout are the same thing. The Subversion checkout is more closely tied to what a Mercurial updates. Once you've checked out the entire repository, after that, all you do is updates, where you just grab pieces like you would with Subversion. Yeah, you're not going to be downloading each time you do an update. And that will become more clear once we describe how distributed systems are different, hopefully. If not, we'll discuss it. It's easier to share code and work in tight groups, and I'll show you how to do that. You can create a branch on your machine and then easily share that over the network with other people. So, for example, for the IBM demo, you have a whole bunch of people coding like mad,
they don't have to worry about breaking any builds. They can all collaborate. There's new capabilities and commands to help things get easier, and we'll talk about some of those. And there's going to be this question, I'm sure, why didn't we go with Git? Because Git's the other competing distributed source management system out there. And the reason is because Mercurial is a little bit easier to understand, better documentation, better support for Eclipse, and it's a little bit more similar to what we are used to. So, oops. Okay, here we are. So let's talk about distributed source control systems a little bit. And I'll have some graphics and a couple slides so I can show you too, for those who are visual learners. So Subversion is centralized, meaning that every time you need to talk to the repository, whether you need to do an SVN log, you need to check something in, you need to check something out, if you need to do a SVN blame, all of these different functionalities or features require you to communicate with the server. So if ARC is down, which is where our Subversion is currently located, you can't do any of those things. Also, as I mentioned before, if someone is doing a blame, it really slows down the SVN process on ARC. It will slow down the whole team when they try to check in or update, things like that. Mercurial and other distributed SCMs are different. Developers will clone the repository. So they basically get a copy of the entire repository, and they have it locally on their system. So blames, updates, things like that all happen first locally on the system. And then changes can be passed around between the clones. And so that's called pushing or pulling. You push changes to Brady, or he can pull from me. In cluster resources, we will still have a central repository which all the public builds will be made from. This will kind of be like like in Linux. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Linux kernel development process, but Linus Torvalds, he controls the official tree, and he's the gatekeeper along with a few of his lieutenants of what gets put in that tree. And there's lots of other branches out there, other parallel development. Source trees, I guess, I don't know what to call them, out there, but they aren't maintained by Linux and by Linus. And basically, if it's not in the main Linux tree, none of the distros are going to get it, and no one's really going to see it unless you email around your own version of the kernel. So we will have on CAUS, we're going to move it from ARC to CAUS. That will be the official version where all the builds are made from, and where if it's in there, then it's an official feature or fix of cluster resources. Clones are easy to make and are cheap, relatively speaking. Thus, it makes it easy for everyone to commit changes, create private branches, and do scary stuff without affecting everyone else. Okay, how to install. So, sudo apt-get install Mercurial. For those of you Red Hat rebels, I don't know, look up how to do it with Yum. Most major distros should have this. If it doesn't, switch distros. And then I think Gentoo has one too, of course. The build machines, we've already installed HG on all of those, so you don't have to worry about that. And most of you don't make builds, so no worries there. If you want to, most distros have an old version, like from 2 years ago. So if you want any of the newer features, like colors in your terminal or extensions, you'll want to download the newest version. Although the latest Ubuntu coming out, I think, does have an up-to-date Mercurial, but you'll have to maybe wait for that. All right, so once you've installed it, using sudo or your favorite package manager, then there's just a few things you have to do. You don't have to, but you should create an HGRC file in your home directory and place the following information in there. So you're going to have your username. So you say username equals, and then you put your full name, or what you want to be displayed as your full name, in Achman's case.
Is that UI part?
This is UI, yeah, bracket UI, yeah, for user interface. And then your email address. Editor. This is, for those of you who work on Moab and check things in to the repository, we use a thing called CI tool, at least some of us do, that makes it easier to add notes and things to checking in. So in this example, I use that as my editor, which then invokes VI, or you could use VI or Nano or gedit or Emacs would also work, I guess. Yeah, anyway. Then you run hgdebug install, and that will confirm that everything's set up okay. If not, it will give you some errors. It might, if you don't create your HGRC file, it will warn you about that. Just a good diagnostic tool. Okay, like subversion, all Mercurial commands have a syntax similar to HG subcommand args. So, svn, log, the revision number, HG is exactly the same way. And most of the commands have one-to-one equivalents. For example, HGCI, HG update, HG diff, HG log, etc. You have to be a little careful though, because some of these commands, even though they're exactly the same name, they have slightly different behaviors. And we'll talk about those gotchas in a second. For example, HG update doesn't do what you think it does. It does something slightly different. You use HG help to find out about any of them. And for the Eclipse people, there's GUI plugins for Mercurial as well. So, all right. So let's see how well this shows up. This is really small, isn't it? Okay, I'll send you a link to this. This is simply a battery just died. Simply it kind of talks about some of the commands. And I'll show you these from the command line in big font so you can read it. But it also shows you some of the different options that are available and gives you an introduction to the terminology it uses. Okay, this one's easier to read. Okay, so this is basically a cheat sheet and kind of a flow of how things work. I'll use the cursor up here to point. Back. So you start with the central repository. This, for example, would be our repository on cause. And you make a clone of it on your local machine using this HG clone command. So this is basically like a subversion checkout that we're used to, okay? And once we have that, we have the entire repository and a working copy in a directory. So if we do, we can go ahead and change things, or we can make, and then we can check those in. We can do an HG log at this point. HG tip is a way to show you the most recent check-in, essentially. So if you just want to see the last thing that happened without having to do HG log piped ahead, you just do HG tip. It will show you the most recent check-in. Sorry. And here it also shows that you can create a private branch. This is one way of doing it. So a private branch or a clone of your local repository. Say I had to create, Brady wants to create his Easter egg in MCM. He would get, or in Moab, because MCM is not changing, he'd get a clone of Moab, and he would create a clone that would be called Moab-Easter egg. And then he could make changes on that. So he can make some modifications here. Then he could do an HG status to see what files have changed, just like SVN. He can do an HG diff, just like an SVN diff, to see a diff of what's changed. And then he can commit. Once he commits, it's only going to change his local repository. Nothing on cause has changed at all. No one else can see his change. But it's now been given a change set ID, a revision number, and his log messages there as well. In HG, there's also a nice trick. It's called HG rollback. Say Brady checked that in and realized, I made a mistake, I wanted to add more, or that was a dumb message. He can do HG rollback and it will uncheck the last commit he did, and it will restore his working directory the way it was before. So if he does an HG diff, he can see all those changes that he had just checked in.
Does it free up the revision number that was allocated?
It does.
Is the rollback just for the last commit, or is it at the point of clone?
It's only at the last commit, and you can only roll back once. So if you check in two things and then roll back, you can't do another rollback. It'll only do your last commit. Was that your question?
Yeah.
Preemptive answering again. Yeah. Okay. HG revert is just like SVN revert. It undoes any changes you've done to a local working sources that you haven't checked in yet. And of course, the HG log shows you what's changed. I'll show you this main line in person. Basically, if you want to get, if this repository test hello in this example was actually a clone from hello directly, and you wanted to get changes that Doug had just checked in to cause at the central repository, you could perform an HG pull, which will create, which will pull those changes down in a separate branch, a separate set of changes. Then you have to do an HG update to actually make that become part of your local repository, your working copy, I should say. Sorry. So, for example, you've made a clone, and you have a copy of the repository and a working copy of the source right there in that directory. If you're checking things in, you're adding stuff to your local version of the repository. If you do an HG pull, any changes in the central repository or the repository you clone from are going to be added to your repository, not to your working copy. So if you want to see Doug's changes show up in your working Moab .h file, you have to do an HG update. And then it will update and change the moab.h file based on the local repository. So that's why HG update is a little bit different than SVN update. It's not pulling from the central repository, it's pulling from your local repository. So I'll show you that. And then for those of us who have check-in rights, once you've gotten everything perfect in your local repository, you can do an HG push, and that will push it to the central repository. Yes?
Now, when you say local, you don't mean local to the machine, right? Still, think the files are being hosted on cost.
No, it's local to your machine.
So if my hard drive died,
Then you'd lose your changes. Unless you've pushed it to the central repository or sent it in a patch. So, I mean, the idea is you develop in your local repository until you get things just the way you want it, until you're ready to have it submitted to one of the gatekeepers to be adopted to the main trunk, or the main tree, I should say. And when that's the case, then it will be immortalized out on cause and backed up and everything else. So yeah, that does bring up a good point. This may change your habits to think that you're secure because you're checking stuff in, but that may be a false sense of security until you've pushed or sent a patch to someone. Okay, so here's some gotchas. That was one of them that's not listed here. Mercurial check-in does not print out anything if it succeeds. This is something that really bothered me. Subversion does, you remember, check stuff in. It prints out the revision number that was just checked in. So if HG doesn't do that, it doesn't mean it's broken. It just means that it worked. So if there was a problem, it would have told you. Revision numbers can no longer be trusted. Okay, this is important. Mercurial does have a revision number like 1709 or 1028 that is attached to every change set. Now, a change set is basically a commit. Okay, a change set is a log message that you attach to a bunch of changes, and that's a commit you can think of, and it's given a hash, a really long hash, and that uniquely identifies it with any other change set in the world. So because it's distributed, we can't all go off of revision numbers, because what if Trev checks in 10 things? So say we clone from the same repository, and so we're at revision 10, both of us. But then Trev checks in 10 things, and I check in 10 other things that are completely different. Well, we're both at revision number 20 now, but they're completely different revision numbers. So the change set ID, this hash, uniquely identifies his changes from mine. So the revision number is nice for your local repository. It's an easy way for you to keep track of things locally. But if you start talking to Brady, or if a customer starts talking to me, I'm going to need to know that change set ID. Now, we have a way to help make that easier. I'll tell you about it.
So presumably the change set ID will be viewable in moab-about?
It is. It will be, yeah. As soon as we make the switch, we've already got all the code changes ready for that. We'll check them in. Yeah, all the places you could find the revision before, you'll also be able to find a change set ID. With that said, the revision number, if the customer gives you the revision number, the little one, there is a way to find out what it maps to, because the build system is going to automatically assign a revision number that just increments every time a build is successfully uploaded, and it's going to create a mapping file that says this revision number maps to this change set ID. So our customers don't have to change the way they work.
Okay.
But internally, we still will have to keep that in mind.
And that's just on upload?
It's only an upload that will be incremented, yeah.
Because a lot of times I make builds and then FCP them off to demo system too.
Well, I can change it then so that every time a build is successfully created. It's no big deal.
That might be.
Yeah, let's see. Also, Mercurial does make it nice. I mean, these change set IDs are like, I don't know, they're like 40 characters long. They're huge. You can just use the first 6 or 7 characters, and Mercurial, it'll try to figure out what you mean. And if there's no collisions, then you only have to use that small number. Or, like I said, locally, you can use the number yourself. I'll show you that on the command line. Okay, to get updated code, you must do an HG pull and then an HG update, or if you're lazy, HG pull-u, which does both in the same command. If there are conflicts after an HG pull, it will warn you. It won't let you do an update. It will force you to do an HG merge. And then if you have a graphical merge tool installed, it will pull that up and you'll be able to interactively fix the merge. Or if you don't, it's going to do just like Subversion does and make those little arrows in your files, and you have to fix them. You don't check in directly to central repo anymore. You must either create a patch and send it to a gatekeeper or do an HG push. And this is already law here at CRI, but we must be very careful checking out code outside of our internal network, especially now that the entire repository will go each time you check out. That's even scarier to me, at least. So you have to get permission from a certain people if you want to take the source code or check out the repository anywhere but inside our internal network, just to protect our IP, our intellectual property. Okay, so let me now show you a demo. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Does Mercurial let you check in if your local source isn't updated?
Yeah, it will.
So you blow away other stuff?
No, you won't. It will do once you do a pull or a push. It's going to do try to do a merge. If there's any conflicts, it'll force you to resolve it. Did I say something wrong, Sean?
You won't do a merge. You do get to do fetch for part of your merge. You just do a pull, you have changes, it'll just create another branch. If you have no changes and you do a pull, then it won't create a branch.
If you have changes that you've checked in,
So it's going to find the youngest common ancestor. I
Right.
guess. And so if you haven't done anything, then there won't be a problem. It'll just be like a linear
right?
sequence of changes. So if you've made changes and someone else has made changes, it will branch at that point.
Yeah, but then it'll say you can do a merge to bring the heads back together.
You can do a merge, but it won't do it for you.
Right.
Unless you run fetch.
Okay. Sorry, you're right.
Do an automatic merge for you.
Okay, that's correct. You have to do an HG merge yourself. So in Subversion, it's all linear, but in Mercurial, it's possible for your local repository to get branched off in these little trees, and each of these trees is going to have a little head. They call them branches. Each of these little branches. That's one thing you have to be careful with Mercurial. Their documentation, they use the word branch very liberally, more liberally than we're used to. So you just kind of keep that in mind. Okay. So when we talk about branches, we're going to talk about cloned branches that are actually different directories, at least for now. There's another concept called name branches where you have branches within one repository that you actually give names. And then there's these idea of unnamed branches, which are simply diversions or divergences of the source and actually create different heads. And I'll be able to demonstrate that as well.
Okay,
Brian.
yeah, I'd be interested in that. Just so, if I've made a fix that I need to make a build of,
Yeah.
just how do I get that in so I can make a build of that change?
Okay. And I might have to draw some pictures too.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so here's the screen. You'll see down here at the bottom, I've got 3 different screens open. These names are all, so Booty is my host name, Mahina is another machine we're going to be using, and server, this is cause where the repositories will be stored, okay? So I've created a new, I'm going to be working on a repository called Moab HG. It's simply just a copy of the Yahoo branch. But pretend this is a branch that we're working on for a demo or something, okay? So here on Mahina, I have HG installed. So if I run debug install, it's going to tell me that there's no username found using Josh at Mahina. Instead, specify username in an HGRC file. So I'll go ahead and create that now. clusterresources.com. Editor, I won't worry about that. Well, let's do this. Hopefully you can find it. All right, so now I can do my debug install. No problems detected, so I'm good to go. Now I'm going to make a clone of the branch I want to work on, or the repository I want to check out. So in this case, I have to give it port 8000. That's because I haven't set up the web browser, the web server on Cause to do this. You usually don't have to specify a port, okay? So I use the HTTP protocol to do this, and the name of it's Moab HG. So I'll go ahead and clone it. Now, the initial checkout does take a little bit longer than SVN's checkout, but not by much, because it does have to get all of the repository history and also create a working files for you. Yes?
So the master repository lives on Cause or Arc?
On Cause.
Okay.
It lives on Arc now, but we're going to be moving it to Cause.
Okay.
So, okay, so now it says that it's added 7,000 change sets and all these different files. So let's go take a look. Now I have this directory called Moab HG, and if I do an ls, it looks exactly like what we would expect when we check out from Subversion. Here's my working copy of files.
So is this for the .hg file or folder?
Yes, it is right there. .hg, you'll see it. And there's a .hg tags file as well. That's how it keeps track of tags. That is under revision control, just so you know. So the nice thing is that, like Noah pointed out, the HG directory is in here, and it's in no other directory. For example, if I go into source, I don't see any of these annoying .svn files anymore. So let's see. I wanted to show you. Okay, so let's just take a look at some of the basic commands. Yeah, go ahead.
Would you be, if you add another product to that, like MCM or something, would you put it in the same repository, or would you have a separate repository?
We probably have a separate repository. Almost assuredly we would, yeah. So you can use hglog to look at revision history. Or you can use a slightly enhanced version called hglog, which is kind of cool because it shows you on the left here a kind of a textual representation of how different branches occur and how they merge together. For example, here at this point, I actually had two branches of development going on. They started here at this change set 7169. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, okay, Sean? And then later at 7173, they were merged together. So this has to do with the fact that at one point I was developing in Subversion and in Mercurial at the same time, and so I had to merge the two changes together. That's why it says merge with SVN changes. We will not be keeping SVN around once we migrate. But that's an easy way to show you all these different branches of development and how they kind of correspond.
So if somebody had checked out from the root after you had checked, let's see.
Want me to go down a little bit more?
No, I'm just thinking of the hypothetical of how does somebody else check back in with you if they had checked out before? You know, if they checked out at the same time and you branch this way,
Right.
then you come back in, they want to come back in, but they don't have, well, they would have your changes if they checked in after you.
Yeah, they will only get my changes if I've checked in, and then I've given that to Doug, who will check it into the main repository.
Do you do that independently to him, or do you go back to the repository and he goes to the repository?
I do it independently to him, or
As a patch?
as a patch, exactly. Or if you have special access to Doug's repository, his copy, you can do an HG push to Doug, where he can pull from yours. And I'll show you how to set that up really easy. There's a command you use to basically create a little web browser real quick on your machine that allows you to push and pull if you give people access to that. So that's how it will work. So here it shows you the revision ID. That's what this is right here. This is what Mercurial calls the easy revision ID. And like I said, this is unique to only your repository. Doug's repository for this change set may have a different revision number. So you cannot tell Doug to check out this revision number because you might get the wrong one. This is what you need to tell Doug to check out, this hash number. This change set ID is what we call it. And all of this represents the change set. Okay. HG tip I mentioned. HG tip will show you the status of the most recent check-in. HG parents is a command that will show you all of the branches that were merged together to form this change that you're looking at right now. So if I go back and look at this, that's not what I wanted to do. So if I want to, let me get back down here, this one where we created a branch. So it's, let's see, 7173. HG parents, dashes, 7173. So if I tell it to look at revision 7173, the parents of it, I can see the two parents that were merged together to form the new, to form this new entity, this new branch that's now going in the tree. There's also a thing called HG heads. Go ahead.
Can you update to any branch, not just the branch that you checked out from?
Yeah, it's possible to push changes in between branches. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Clone branches is what. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So HG heads will show you if there are any unmerged basically versions or heads in the repository. So let me draw this out so it's a little bit more clear. And this is getting in a little bit more in depth. Is this permanent or not? Okay, it's not. Well, maybe. This is permanent, I think. Oh well, we don't have it. It's probably the old Novell people playing a trick on us. Well, I think he's going to get one. So this is going in pretty much a lot of depth. I don't know if I want to go into too much depth on the heads and things like that for this meeting. I just want people to be able to check out, check in, get a good feel for what's out there, and then they can do some more research or ask questions on their own. So on that. But the HG heads command will show you any basically branches that you unnamed branches of development in your own repository that have not yet been merged together. So, all right. So let's go ahead and make some changes. And let me first of all make a clone over here as well on 2 machines, so I can show you how you can swap them back and forth between each other. So while that one's cloning, I'll go back here and I'll make some changes. So let's say, for example, I wanted to change some things in MMI. So I go to the bottom of the file, and I'm going to add a new function. Thanks a lot, Brian. Okay, great. So I've added the new function. I can do an HGDiff, and it will show me what I've changed, just like SVN. I can do an HGStatus -m, which shows me what's been modified. If I don't do the -m, it of course is going to spit out a, well, I guess it didn't. I expect a lot more output. Awesome, this is awesome. So it shows me what's been modified. Maybe. Let's take a look. No. There we go. There's a lot. I thought so. I don't know why those are all in conflict, though. Those are probably checked in or something. I don't know. Look at the help. I'll tell you. Yeah, I don't think they're in conflict right now. All right, so yeah, we've made changes. Now let's go ahead and check it in. So if I do a check-in at this point, it's going to bring up my favorite editor, hopefully. It does. So then I can add in my message here. Added a new function for a demo. And it doesn't say anything. That means it worked. So now I can do an HGLog, and it will say right up here that, sure enough, I added a function for a demo. So it's been checked in. My new revision number is this, and here's my change set ID. I could have done the same thing with HGTip. I'm still getting used to that command. It's pretty nice, though. So, and all these messages about these, just ignore this. This will be gone by the time you get to it using Mercurial. All right, so that's now checked into my local repository, but it's not checked out. It's not checked in to other people's repositories. For example, if I switch to Booty, my work machine, I do an HG poll. It says no changes found. Even though I checked in a change, they aren't found because it's polling from cause, remember, and I only made the change locally on Mahina. So if I want to make that available to everyone, say, for example, I wanted to push this out to cause to make it now available for everyone to download, I can do an HG push. Push creates new remote branches. I'm not sure why that would happen. Okay, so if I want to go ahead and push,
By default, pushing over HTTP is disabled.
oh, how do I enable it?
I don't know whether it's disabled.
Just let me check real quick.
No, there was a message.
See, it says here, SSL required.
There's configurations.
Ah, man, this is going to be a really big pain if it's not going to work.
You could start a web server on your machine and pull from it.
I'm going to use one of your branches. Okay. So I'm going to make new clones. Sorry about this, guys. I should have tested that out. In the spirit of CRI, I didn't really test before I...
Hey,
Wow.
on ProServe, we test that.
Meanwhile, they're happening.
No, I run through it before mostly.
Okay, remind me not to... Do we need to remake this? Okay. All right, so I'm making a new clone because my other one was messed up. All right, 5.2L is what we're working. So we'll go ahead and make a new directory like we did before.
So if we do this again, will that function name get even shorter?
Yeah, probably. I'll probably just add a comment. Okay, so now I'm going to do a check-in. And now if I do a tip, I can see that it's been added. My other directory is now created. Nothing there. Okay, now I'm going to do an HG push. So, okay, we're back where we were. An HG push now should search for any changes, and it's going to push it out there. Now, if you didn't want to do a push, if you just wanted to see what would be sent out, you can do an HG outgoing, and it will show you what you're going to send. So it says added one change set with one changes to one files. So now if I come over here and do an HG pull, it's now going to pull those changes over, but I have to do an HG update because it's not in my local copy yet. So I do an HG update, one file's been updated, and if I now look at mmi.c, go to the bottom, I see my new function was there. So that's kind of an idea of how Doug would push something at the central repository. You do an SHG pull and then do an HG update, and voila, you've got your changes. Yes?
Do you ever not do pull and update together?
The only time you wouldn't do update right after is if you've made changes and you have to do a merge. So if we both made changes, so I'll show you that, for example. Say I make changes over here. So I've made changes in both locations. I'm going to check it in here. Extra comments were made. And then if I come over here, oops, and check these ones in over here. Added some other comments. Okay, so now I see I've got a tip here, added some other comments. Over here I've got a tip. Extra comments were made. So I'm going to go ahead and push this out. By the way, we're not sure why it's so slow pushing. We're going to figure that out. It's a lot faster when you use local repositories. At least it seems to be so.
Local repositories are just network.
Well, yeah, but I mean, even if we created, I think we've tested what we've created. I've created an HTTP server on mine, and it's a lot faster.
Oh, you don't just do my machine.
Yeah.
You can pull from my machine, that's, you can't push to it. It should be the same.
So there's something weird going on. Yeah.
Josh, if you have questions, could you repeat it?
Sure. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
Okay. All right, so I've gone ahead and did a push, so it's in the central repository. So now if I'm over here, and I haven't pushed any of my changes yet, so I do an HG pull. So now it gives me different, it doesn't say to use HG update, it says to use HG heads to see the heads and HG merge to merge. And the reason is because now I have two different tops of the tree, so to speak. I've got the one that I made on Mahina, added some other comments. Oh, that's the one I made here at Booty, added some other comments, and the one I made at Mahina, extra comments were made.
Okay.
So now I need to merge them. And it worked well. This is branch merge, don't forget to commit. So then I can say incremental merge changes from central repo to my local changes. And now if I do a tip, I see that my new commit is in there that represents the merge. And if I do a glog, I can see here that at 7479 a branch was made because I had this extra comments were made, and then they merged back up here at the tip, the very top. So that's how that works. Yeah.
Now, what if you're in the same situation and it says to use HG heads and merge and you accidentally do update?
It won't let you, I don't think. I think you can do a force, because all the commands have a force flag, but it's going to, yeah. Usually if it's not allowing you to do something, it's for a good reason. So, all right, Brian.
So would you now need to do a push to push your merge back up to the central repository?
Yes, you would. Exactly. So in order for your changes to get up there, you have to do a push, yeah.
But most people aren't going to be able to do that to the central repository.
That's right. So all this stuff with push, this is really only applicable to a handful of people, or if you do create your own little repository for your team, like in demo coding madness mode, then pushes will happen. Mostly you're going to be doing pulls. And that's what I would recommend to doing. Say for example, you work on the IDF demo, and Brian, you make a change in a local branch, and Dave wants to get it because he's going to work on it while you go to school.
Right.
You're going to make your repository available, and by default, like we just discovered, push is not enabled. So he's going to have to do a pull from yours, and when he's done, you can do a pull from him. So just pull back and forth between each other. It's easier than worrying about pushes. Yeah.
Are we going to be able to push to the testing directories?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you will be able to do that.
Okay.
So, but you'll only be able to push to those directories.
Okay.
Okay, so that shows you how basically merge would work. Now, if there was a conflict, if I had changed the exact same lines, when I try to do a merge, it would say there was conflicts that need to be resolved. I'd resolve them, then I could do a check-in like that. So, and I think let me just check something. No, you don't have to do a resolve like you do in Subversion. When you fix a conflict, you have to do an SVN space resolved in the file name. That isn't the case with Mercurial. So, yeah.
Just a question. What if you're working on a team where you have several people making changes at once, and you go somewhere for a day, come back, and you want to get the latest updated code from everybody? Do you have to pull from each of their machines?
Yeah, if you don't have a central location, you are going to have to pull from each of their machines.
Most likely your team lead would be setting up a central location that other people would be pushing to, and then you would just update from that central location.
That's probably
Which probably would not be a global repository. It would be a location on your team lead's computer.
yeah, and I'll show you how to do that really, really quickly using HGServe. In fact, I'll show you right now. Here, if I wanted to, from this location, make this repository, this directory I'm in, available to, say, Doug, I just do HGServe P and then a port number. And it opens up a server for me automatically. So then I can go over to Mahina, for example, and I can do HGClone, HTTP, BUTI, 8080 was the port number, I think. And I can just clone. So now I'm actually able to clone that repository over there. So that's how we could share back and forth from each other. And say I made changes over here, then I could do my HGServe, and then from over here I could do an HG pull and pull from them, so forth, back and forth. That's how you could do it. Okay. All right, we've only got about 15 more minutes, so let's say, for example, that if you don't have push privileges, okay, you're going to want to create a patch, which is most people here, I think, or a lot of people here that make patches. So there is a new command called HG export, which allows you to make a patch. You can also send an HG diff, but if you've already checked things in and want to send a patch, use your HG export. So for example, if I wanted to get the last from 7479 to 7481 and send that to someone, I can do 7479 to 7481. Didn't work. Why not? Only does one at a time? I guess the export command only does one revision at a time. You know why this is not working, Sean?
You can specify -r. I think it's just an argument.
Sorry?
I think it's just an argument instead of using -r. Let's do that.
Oh, okay. All right, so you can do ranges there. Okay, so then this will give you a branch. You can pipe it to a file, or patch, excuse me, pipe it to a file and send this over email. And then the person receiving it can do an HB import and just suck that file in and it will apply it. So the same thing can be done with SVN with diff, piping it to a file, and then using the patch command, but this kind of all integrates it together. Now, if you're ever needed to, this is kind of an advanced feature, but there's also something called HG bundle, which, say for example, Brady and I were working on something, but we don't have a network connection. So I can't do a pull and he can't do a push to me. He can do an HG bundle. It will basically do a binary compression of everything that would be sent over the wire if we were connected. He could give it to me on his USB-A drive. I could plug it in and then apply the pull or the push that way. So.
Can I just make one request for anybody who does make patches? Put on the extension TXT. Always name your patches.txt.
So that it's easy to open up your email clients.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, I showed you how merges work. All right, so that pretty much covers most of the basics. If you do HG help, you'll see that there's a lot of commands here we didn't cover. So there's a lot of cool stuff. Yeah.
So if you found a bug and you're sending a reproducible thing to the developer, do you give them the change set ID, I'm assuming?
Yes. Yep, the change set ID. Yep. Exactly. And you'll want to tell them also what branch it came from. So here's a good thing about branches. So there's going to be, if you wanted to check out, for example, the 5.3 branch, 5.3 trunk, you're going to do something similar to this when everything's set up. Or maybe it'll be v5.3. We haven't decided. And then you would check it out just like that. If you want to do v5.3.2 release, it's going to be something like this. Ooh. It's going to be something like that. So you're going to have all these different branches you check out from, you clone, and then you work on, you send a patch, check in things locally. That's how it works. There's a lot of stuff we haven't covered, a lot of advanced things, but this will give everyone, I think, the tools they need to check out, make changes, check in, make a branch, a patch, excuse me, and it kind of gives you an introduction also to local branches and how that can happen. Now, one thing I didn't show you, but you can actually make a clone of a local repository as well. So if I want to do an HG clone of this MOAB 5.2 I have here locally, I can do some scary feature. And it will actually do hard links. So here, most of these are represented with hard links. Until something's changed. So it's a very efficient clone, in other words, this local clone. And you can check in things local here, and then you can push them over to that repository on the same file system. And then you can remove it when you're done, make a patch, whatever. So that can also be done on the local system. All right, let me just finish the slides. Now there is one more thing. I want to keep this to 1 hour, so I'm going to end soon. But there is a little bit more for people who are interested. I'll just spend 10 more minutes to show you another feature of Mercurial that has to do with patches. In Git, there's something called stash, where you can work on something, and then if you're interrupted, maybe I come into your office and say, I need you to work on this right now, it's an emergency. So you'll want to stash away your changes without really checking them in. and then you can bring them back. Well, Mercurial doesn't have a stash, but it has something similar that in some ways is more powerful. So for those of you who are interested, you can stick around for that. But okay, so some of the new capabilities, we demonstrated most of these, I hope. You can create your own you can serve other people your copies, so make it available over the network using HG serve, HG rollback. Mercurial patches we'll go over at the end. HG bisect we didn't cover, but it's a way to help you determine at what revision a build broke.
When you serve, are you just appearing in that address in the port?
Yes, that's correct.
They don't really know that you're a clone or a serve or a...
Yeah. There's no like broadcast or multicast that you're there. So unless someone knows that you're doing that right now, they're not going to be able to find you. And that's why it's really only works with tight-knit groups that are sharing changes. You know, Noel will yell across the hall. I just opened, I'm serving my repository on port 8080. Could you get it, please? Yeah.
You can set up to work just with like an action, right?
Exactly, yeah. And that's the way that our central repository will be done, because it'll be permanent, yeah. And in fact, I didn't show you, but you can take a browser and browse to that same location, and it will show you this really nice looking interface, yeah, where you can see the revision history and download things and stuff like that. So HG export is a more powerful way to create patches if you know how to use it. HG bundle, I talked about that. And HG can use a graphical merge tool to make resolving conflicts easier. These are just some of the things that are new capabilities. Okay, anyone but Scott Brown can ask questions at this time. So I think everyone's asked questions along the way. So yeah, oh yeah, go ahead.
So how's the transition going to work? Are we just going to have a kind of a check-in freeze to SVN while we're moving to Mercurial, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, how is the migration going to work? One day we're just going to say we're going to migrate, and we're going to remove all access to SVN, and so you won't be able to do anything with Subversion anymore. It's kind of brutal, but it's the best way to get everyone switched over without causing problems.
Make sure Mercurial's up before that, so we can debug any problems before Subversion?
Oh yeah, of course we will. Yeah. I mean, we'll have everything working, and then once we know things are perfect, we'll make the switch. We'll let everyone know. But here's something that everyone needs to remember: if you don't have checked-in changes when we make the switch, they're not going to be in Mercurial. So you need to save those off someplace in a diff or something else, and then reapply them, or you'll lose those modifications that you have not yet checked into Subversion. So just keep that in mind. Yeah. Maybe this week, hopefully. Since we've got this momentum, we probably should. But
I just thought of something I want to run by Jared, and that's changing everybody's machine ID, the name of their host name. This might be easier when we're doing HG servers.
okay.
Because then if Sean just says, "Hey, grab my machine," I know. Oh, well, that's just the name of Sean's machine, and I don't have to figure out what.
Yeah, I was already talking to Jared about that.
So you don't have to know his name's Yubi
Exactly.
or Yubby, or whatever it is.
Yeah,
That's something where I'm going to talk to Jared.
Okay, so there may be a few more dependencies. We've already got the testing people. They're ready to do this for the regression tests, as far as I understand. Our build system's ready to go on this. So I think we've covered all of our bases. So it should be pretty smooth. We'll find out, yeah. Nate.
So you said that you don't have to keep track of, when you merges in Subversion, you have to keep track of the revision numbers of both branches you want to merge. Is there anything you have to keep track of with Mercurial when you're doing these branch merges, or is it all automated for you?
I'm told it's all automated for you.
That would be a good thing.
And I think it's pretty much true. It should be easier. Yeah. So you shouldn't have to keep track of anything. And if you do, I guess if there is some sort of confusion, the logs are good enough that you can go back and deduce where merges and branches occurred, so you can figure things out. So you don't have to keep this notebook of revision ranges anymore. I guess the new Subversion does that too, but I read, and there's like 5 outstanding bugs with it. So that's why we decided not to try to upgrade Subversion, but just to move to a new and better system altogether. So, any other questions?
I was just kind of curious about the serve thing. If somebody serves something, you check it out. You don't have to check it back into their serve thing, right? You can check it back into like the head repository.
Yeah, exactly.
Just because I was curious, I could also their machine crashed after they served and we copied it.
Yeah, then you would have a pristine copy of what they had, and you could send that to Doug or check it in yourself. Yep.
So there's something like in SVN switch to switch where it pushes.
I don't know if there's a command to do that, but you can edit a file in your HG directory to change it. Yeah, so, yeah. If you're using name branches, we won't cover this today. Name branches, you can actually switch between branches within the directory, and it will automatically just change all the files in your directory.
So is that like a Git branch?
It's just like a Git branch, except for you can't delete it. So that's why we didn't want to use those. Because if you make an Alex's cool branch, the rest of the world is going to see it if it ever gets into the central repository. You can't get rid of it. So, any other questions? Okay. Well, you guys are welcome to leave. Thanks a lot.